if you practice it until you're at the point of you can reel it off like you would say the alphabet, then it just doesn't exist as such a big deal anymore. It's like if you're asked, can you say the alphabet? You're probably not going to say, well, maybe, I hope so. Hope, it's not a strategy. But you probably say, of course I can. It's the alphabet. The point is, if you just do the work, it takes away that fear. It's about repetition to know that you can show up and ace it and be the best you. Hey guys, Windsor here, and welcome to another episode of the Groove Guru podcast. And this one's another solo cast, and it's around the topic of how I prepare for a tour. And this one's quite relevant because at the time of recording this, I'm in the process of preparing for a Hugh Cornwell band tour I'm doing in Scandinavia a few days from now. And it's a bunch of shows alongside the Undertones, a band we've worked with quite a lot in recent months. And I've just done a practice session earlier today. Like I was running through like 20 Strangler songs, a bunch of repertoire for the Scandinavia dates, and also for some longer sets that we're going to be doing in the UK and EU. And I'm going to run through a process that works for me in preparing for a tour. And these points obviously can be applied to you if you're a musician. And if you're not a musician, they can still be applied to preparing for, it could be a presentation or a talk you're going to give at work, etc. And I think you'll find that there'll be some useful takeaways, whoever you are, from this. The first point I want to cover is preparation is key. And why? Why is preparation key? You know, as a musician, you know, when you're on tour, there's generally much less, if any, time to practice your instrument. Sure, you could do warm-ups here and there, but it's a bit like an athlete. Okay, so if you're an athlete and you're preparing for a sporting event, all right, the time to train is not at the event. You know, it's the time leading up to it. And, you know, I'm not using that example to refer to music being a competition, but that importance of preparation. Okay, so preparation is key to show up being that quality performer that you are, can be, and can be to that next level. So really, preparation is key. And the next thing is the attitude. You know, having the best attitude as well as a structure and a methodology is something that can really assist you in getting the best possible results. Again, the athlete example, another way of thinking about that is the best athletes, if you look at the 100 meter sprint, for example, there's usually fractions of seconds between the athlete that gets first place, second place, third place. So all those athletes at that level, they've got a very similar level of athletic performance and physical performance, and often that difference that can really make a huge difference to being the athlete who wins or the you that shows up at the very best of your ability is that mindset and attitude, and just having certain levels of clarity there can make a big difference. And just prefacing that, another key component about that is, you know, just focusing your mind to where you want. And one of the foundations that I find can really assist in starting a new project is an attitude of gratitude, like being grateful. Like for if you're a professional musician in the process of doing a tour, or it might be your first tour. If you're watching this, you might be wondering, okay, I've got a tour. What's a good way, a useful way to prepare for that and go through that process? And, you know, learning from someone that's done a bunch of tours, that attitude can be key. Like, wow, I have the opportunity of working as a professional musician. That's pretty cool. There's a lot of aspiring musicians who want to do music professionally who haven't done it yet, and you certainly can. And, just to remind yourself, yeah, thank you, I get a chance to do professionally what I love to do. And that perspective of that you get to do that feeling of gratitude can really assist you starting the project out on a positive note. And when you are with other people, having a positive attitude and bringing that to the table is something that's pretty palpable. Now, again, it's not just all attitude and think positive thoughts, but part of that is a clear understanding of a process, and it's about finding what works for you, finding a process that works for you, and that relates to the how of doing it. And I want to lay out a process that works for me that I've been using for the current upcoming tour with the Hugh Cornwell band, and also how I've used that process with other work that I've done. So the first point is clarity in this process, which is clarification of the repertoire. And if you're touring with a band artist, you've got a tour booked and you're leading up to that, then the chances are that the material already exists. Creating the material from scratch is another matter, another podcast. The focus here is practicing material that's pre-existing. So clarifying the repertoire, one would be getting a list of reference tracks from the band artist. Like, for example, with Hugh, I've been working with him for a few years, and for the work that we do, the tour, he's the one that chooses the repertoire. So I've been working with Hugh for a while, and I've got a list of the tunes, and I have those. And if you're new to an artist, or it's a completely new artist that you haven't worked for, then so checking out those original reference recordings, like album tracks, is a great first point. And also referencing any live tracks that the band artists have performed. Like, often arrangements live are different from what happens on the studio record. Like, if the studio album's got a fade out in one of the tracks, then usually there's some kind of ending that's been made, instead of just doing like manual fade out, So going on YouTube and checking out any live albums the band and artist have done is very useful. And if you've been working with a band or artist for a while, then you've probably got your own reference tracks. It could be a gig recording or recording of a rehearsal that you can check out. So that's it. So getting a list of the tracks is key. Then the second part, listen to the material, and you want to be as familiar as possible with the music and your part and your ability to play it. And if you're a musical director in the project, then really being familiar with the material so you can explain and direct people as appropriate. That's key. And when you're learning a set of songs, then something that can work amazing, some do this, some don't, I do, it's creating charts or just writing out the details of the music. And it could be just writing out the form, the general shape. Okay, so intro, verse, chorus, bridge, etc. That helps you internalize the music. And after that, then more detailed charts, like writing out the riff or any key figures, or even doing transcriptions of the music can really work well. And again, if you've got a lot of music to learn, then just the act of writing it out for you to make that chart, you can find that you will internalize, at least conceptually, so much of it that when you then go to practice on your instrument, it can really be, wow, quite a reduction in time required. Like, I remember writing out certain songs that I've had to perform, and by the time that I've written out a chart, I can just go to my instrument and play it, and it's pretty much in there. So creating charts and transcriptions, that's a definite thing I want to point you to. And when you've got a clear idea of the music, you've listened to it and you've charted it, then we're at the level of solo or individual practice, which as a methodology, then you've got the music, you've got a chart, you play and you practice with the chart repeatedly until you can play the music great. And, some gigs allow you to have charts on the gig. Some gigs, that's not the thing to do. Some people call it cheating if you've got a chart. But the point being is to get to the point where you can play the music and know you're playing it right without the chart, then it's practicing playing it without the chart is the key. So as part of my process, I usually have a chart and music and I practice with the chart. And then once I know that I'm getting all the details as I want them to be, then I practice without the chart until I don't need it and I know that I'm doing it right. Another thing you can do is then play the music just being with your instrument. And this is a great way to prove to yourself that you know the music inside out. And something that one of my tutors taught me a few years ago that I still apply is for me to know that I really know the set inside out. One thing I like to do is have a list of the songs and a list of tempos, and I practice with a metronome, just me and my instrument. It could be drums, singing, samples, and I can play all of the music and hear all of the bits in my head, knowing all the arrangements, etc. And when I get to that level, I know I can do it. And it's a great way to build confidence and lead to you showing up to rehearsals with other musicians from that confident space. It really makes a huge difference. And that leads on to the next part, which is after you've practiced individually, then usually there's some kind of rehearsal. And a great thing to keep in mind about that is that's not where you learn the songs. It's more about you learning finer details. So a good key is to remember rehearsal with the band is for you to practice what you've already practiced. Okay? Because rehearsal takes time and money for rehearsal rooms, etc. And that's part of it. But when you can show up knowing that you know the music, and when everyone else has done their homework, then again you can refine those smaller details. And that's usually the level of professional acts. Okay, like I was chatting with Pete Ray Biggin on the podcast, and he was giving the example of with Level 42, he shows up and the band, they all know it and they usually run the set once and any new bits, and if they need to do it once more, then they do it, but most often that's enough. And similar thing with Hugh Cornwell, if I've not played together for a while, we turn up and we play the set, and it may have been a few months, but yeah, it's all there, and then we can work on any other details we want. And another key, again, when I was chatting with Pete Ray Biggin on the podcast, this one came up, which was that make rehearsal easy so that your individual practice, what you've practiced, you are at a level that when you come to the table that it's easy to do. Okay, you don't have any self-doubt in your mind, you just know that you can turn up and nail it. And again, it can take a while to get to that level of showing up in that way, but it's certainly possible, and from my experience makes a huge difference and makes the project much more enjoyable, and the process much more enjoyable. So that's mostly applied to recapping on an existing project. So when I play with Hugh Cornwell, I've played that repertoire quite a lot. So these days it's mainly recap on things we've already done with occasional new pieces of music to learn. And even though I've played a lot of that music before, there's still an opportunity to, take some aspect of what I'm doing to the next level. It could be just making, my tempo and groove feel even better. enhancing the sound, being more relaxed when I play. So there's always that opportunity to level up, no matter how many times you've played something. And again, not saying that you need to, but there is that opportunity. Now, if it's a completely new project, like a band or artist that you've never worked with before, it could even be your first tour, then an example of that from recent months was when I played with Wishbone Ash, a classic rock band, and their drummer wasn't available for some shows. And there was a show in Bilbao, Spain, and I was asked to do the show, and very grateful I didn't have to audition for it. I was recommended and was asked to do the show. So here I am with this new band that I've never played with, that I haven't really heard the material that much before the rehearsal, and that band usually don't rehearse. And for this gig, we had a few days of rehearsal, which for that band is a bit of a luxury. It was funny, is that when I turned up to the rehearsal before the show in Bilbao, Spain, the guitar player, Mark, like joked. He was like, wow, this is the first time I've rehearsed with the band in years since joining them. And funnily enough, it was at the same rehearsal room as well. But the point was, I had to turn up and for all of my parts to be there and ready to, boom, just do it and play the set. And as it worked out, it turned out really, really good. It's like, wow, I had done my practice and my homework, and everyone was like, wow, this is going to work. Great. And the show went great. And for that one, I had rehearsals, and then afterwards there was a few gigs on their UK tour I was asked to do. And for that, it was me turning up to the gig and just doing the gig. And again, the point is, what allowed me to do that was a few things. One, knowing that I could, and two, having a methodology like I've just set out. Get the repertoire, get the list of songs, listen to it, make charts, practice. And it can be challenging to do that when you do work like that, it gives you a certain confidence and a knowing that you can do it. And if there's someone listening to this, that if you have got a new opportunity and you've not, say, done a tour before, or you're in a position of actually being asked to turn up and just do the rehearsal and it be great first time, then you can do it. If I can do this kind of thing, then you can too. Now, in the actual process of practicing in prep, because this is mainly focused on instrumental practice, some key things are eliminate distractions, because really focus is key. And you want it to be so when you're practicing, it's just you and your instrument and the music. So one of the things that makes the biggest difference, I find, is, no phone. Like, turn your phone off, turn your notifications off. At least, if you're using your phone sometimes to reference music or a metronome app on it, which I sometimes do, then my phone's on airplane mode, because to really do the quality practice, it needs to be just that sustained focus. Because when you do the repetitions, that's how you develop memory. It's literally by repeating that you form new neural connections that way. So getting rid of the phone when you're practicing it is huge. And another interesting one was that to practice well, practice like a robot. Now, I don't mean being stiff and have no feel, but more like, being mechanical and have a routine. And there's power in that. And I first learned that I remember when I was at high school and I was studying for some exams. Usually at school, I got pretty good grades and it came pretty easy to me that way. And I didn't always have a set way that I would study for exams. But I remember this one time that I decided, okay, I've got some exams coming up, so I'm going to every night study for half an hour. So I would routinely read my notes. And I just kind of, commanded myself to go through the motions and just do the reading each night. And So I did that for the few weeks before the exams, and the results for my exams were like, wow, like markedly better. And I was surprised that, wow, I got 95% for that one. Or, like the results were, consistently in that high grade ballpark. And the thing that I had done that contributed to that was consistent studying, consistent prep. And for this, it's consistent practice. So, just do what it takes for you to get to the point that you know that you're doing it right. And again, repetition is key. And the mind, it's like a computer, because we are programmable. Okay. And basically, without going into details on that, you can program your mind with the stuff that you want. So it's what we're talking about now is programming your mind with the parts, and programming your body so that ultimately you develop things in muscle memory so that your body remembers it, so that you don't have to remember it up here all the time. So that's key. And, when you're practicing, reflect on your practice, because sometimes when you are playing your instrument and really, really into it, it can be really useful to elevate your perspective that way. I talk about this in my first solo cast, and that practical process that really helps with it is recording yourself. So if you can put a mic in the room when you're practicing, or if you can record into your computer and listen back, that reflection is certainly key in that. And even if you record rehearsals and record shows, just to listen back to hear how it actually sounds can be really helpful. And you can get to the process that you don't need to do that all the time, though. When you're learning new things and there's a lot to take on board, just having that reference point can be really useful. And keep leveling up. Recently, when I was working on some repertoire with Hugh Cornwell band shows, like I've played a lot of these songs, probably hundreds of times in total. Like a lot more in practice than at the shows. And I still find ways that I can level up my playing. And it could be something as simple as just making my timing even better, like physically relaxing more and more. And the point is, it's no matter how much you've done something, there's always something you can do to take your performance of that to the next level. So that always leveling up is useful to keep in mind. To continue watching the rest of this Groove Guru podcast episode for free, visit windsordrums.com/podcast or click the link in the description below.